Hola everybody, I'm Seth.
And I'm Lauren, and we are Ganza Media.
And today we're going to be answering frequently asked questions that we get about living in Mexico or visiting Mexico as a foreigner or tourist.
Yeah, and I hope that the construction and noise outside is not affecting the audio here. They've been doing construction at our building for like days now, but stick with us because we have a lot of questions to answer.
So we've been meaning to make this video for a while and tackle a lot of them all at once. We're going to try to move quickly, keep it as interesting as possible, and not dive too deeply into these topics. A lot of this will be just sort of to demystify, and it's not really to say there's a right or wrong way to do things in Mexico. It's just our personal way of things that we've personally done or haven't done. So a question we get a lot is, can you drink the tap water here in Mexico? The answer is generally no. For the most part, Mexicans don't really drink it. We don't ever drink it. There probably are certain places in Mexico where you can drink the water safely. From what I understand, the issue is in the distribution. Like, it's purified at the source, but the distribution channels, it can get polluted or you can get sick off of drinking it because of what it can come in contact with. Very easy to not drink it in Mexico because there's lots of good systems in place. Like, you have big water bottles that you can get a subscription for and they'll be delivered to your house or accommodation, or you can just buy them yourself. They're very inexpensive.
Now, we don't take it that far. I mean, we use the tap water for a lot of everyday purposes. Like, if we're gonna be cooking and boiling the water, then we have used the tap water for that. We brush our teeth with the tap water. We definitely don't like hold our nose or shut our mouth in the shower to make sure we don't get like any water in our mouth. So
Exactly.
We don't go as far as some people might. And so far, I can say that nothing has happened to us by doing that and living everyday life by using the tap water.
Even in the US, a lot of times we didn't use the tap water. We use like a Brita filter, so you could also bring that with you to Mexico or buy one here. But in general, the easiest way, the inexpensive way, is to use those giant jugs. Super easy to come by and super easy to get in your house. Now, another big one is, a lot of people say, aren't you supposed to not eat the street food because you'll get sick? Now, that is the worst advice. Whoever told you that, I think the biggest misconception with not eating street food, and I'm a huge street food fanatic, it's my favorite type of food in the world. And in Mexico, it's best of the best in Mexico. It's hard to beat. The big thing I think that people don't realize is a lot of times when you get sick from eating street food, it's not because the person that prepared it was doing something nasty. It's because you didn't wash your own hands. If you're going around and touching the buses, transportation, doors.
Paying with money in Mexico, you have to have a lot of coins and a lot of cash. So when you touch that, or even when you pay for the street food with money and you have germs on your hands, if you don't immediately sanitize, and you just dive right in.
Now, you can probably tell if one street food vendor for some reason is not very hygienic, and you can skip out on that. But definitely eat the street food. I'm not gonna lie to you and say I've never gotten sick in Mexico. I definitely have. I think they call it Montezuma's revenge. But I have a weak stomach in general, and it hasn't necessarily been from street food. I've just been sick a few times in the duration of all the time I've spent here. Toilet paper. So can you flush the toilet paper? That's the worst transition of all time, but let's go ahead and go for it.
Well, hey, it's in the same category, so yeah, we get this question a lot. So this is just, honestly, we're gonna go ahead and let you know just our experience. We do not flush the toilet paper.
Well, it depends. So for the most part, we don't flush the toilet paper. Now, obviously there's exceptions, you know, at resorts, certain cities, you might be able to flush it, certain areas. So if you're in a touristy area, there's a lot less confusion because whoever owns the establishment that has a bathroom knows that people using it there probably don't know whether or not they can flush. So there will be a sign either saying, do not flush the toilet paper, or we've even seen signs that say, please do flush the toilet paper. That's rare, but I have seen it before.
Yeah, but when in doubt, you can always ask your host. Personally, if I don't want to ask or I'm unsure, I just throw it in the trash can because that to me is easier than worrying about if I'm gonna mess somebody's plumbing up. For you to be in somebody else's house or, you know, leasing an apartment from somebody and ruin their plumbing, I don't wanna be like the reason why that happened.
If you're in a less touristy area, there's a few hints. There usually won't be a sign because they expect everyone there to know, but there usually be like a big trash can or regular sized trash can next to the toilet, usually with a bag in it. So that's obviously, you know, you're not supposed to flush the toilet paper. But if you're still left with any kind of doubt, the best thing to do is just ask. It can be embarrassing, but it's part of life.
Don't freak out about throwing it away because there's a lot of different ways that it's still hygienic. Like, number one, there's always a bag in the trash can. Sometimes the trash cans always have lids, and every toilet paper roll I've ever had in Mexico has been scented. So that's also a plus.
Yeah, and I've actually seen some tourists who are like surprised that we comply with that and don't flush flush it? They're like, no, you know, if it's brown, it goes down and things like that. But I'm like, well, that's fine. If you're okay with screwing someone's plumbing up, go for it. And it's not like you're gonna go to jail or anything for flushing that toilet paper. But
hopefully not, because a few times I've actually like meant to throw it in the trash can and accidentally put it back in the toilet. So.
Yeah, it's like just that tendency. But yeah, it's not a big issue as much as you think. The biggest thing can be the confusion on whether or not you're supposed to flush it. But personally, for me, like when in Rome, you know, I definitely travel by the when in Rome. So for those of you that are new here, we have been living in Mexico on and off since December 2020. We have never officially became residents, and as you may know, a lot of stuff is changing with the tourist permits. Mexico as a country is sort of cracking down recently on what they call perpetual tourism. Basically people like us, and essentially that have been not eligible to get residency or putting off getting residency for various reasons. Basically we have been coming in on what is known as a tourist permit. Now many people call it a tourist visa, and that's fine too. Technically it's not a visa because it doesn't get stamped into your passport. You get a card known as a FMM, and that is basically like a migration form that any tourist coming in has to fill out. They are $25. It may be up to $30 now, but it's somewhere between $25 and $30. Usually if you book a flight into the country, you've already paid that $25. So you just have to keep a record of that. So when you leave the country, you have proof that you already paid it. You can show them and you don't have to repay it. And then if you're staying less than 7 days, you don't have to pay it at all, but you still have to get the card. Legal wise, you always have to get one. It used to be that if you're only coming in so far, you don't have to get one. If you're only staying for like less than 3 days, you don't have to fill one out. But now everywhere you have to get one. But the thing is, you'll notice a common theme that not all laws are enforced everywhere. So many times you won't be asked to give one if you're crossing the land borders, for instance. We've seen it where we have to specifically request one. The border agent might assume you're only coming in for the day, and they will just wave you on through and not make you do an FMM card, so you have to go out of your way to get one. One thing you're going to notice as a reoccurring theme in this video is we're going to talk about how Mexico can be very inconsistent with the way laws are enforced and where they're enforced. So just because you read something online, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen exactly that way when you arrive to Mexico or go through immigration. It's been said that the only consistency in Mexico is inconsistency, and I think in a lot of cases that can be true. So you're going to find that out.
It all depends on the agent that is, you know, bringing you in via the immigration. So that's also part of the inconsistency as well. It's like per person. So you never really know exactly what will happen until you come into the country.
And it really is, the immigration officer has a lot of power when it comes to making a discretionary choice. And that's a lot of the things you're seeing now with this new crackdown on perpetual tourism. Now, a lot of people mistakenly think that 180 days was always guaranteed before. We actually used to think that. But that actually has never been true. I mean, they can really give you anywhere from a week to 2 weeks to anything they want to write down. They basically, when you get your FMM card, you go through the border, they're going to write down a certain amount of days, and many people think you can also cheat that and stay longer, and historically that has been true as well. But it is getting more and more automated where your information is in a system, what we've been told. So it's not just written on a card, it's in a system, and it can be checked later. For people who are still saying you can overstay your FMM permit, definitely don't recommend that. We've seen some horror stories pop up recently about people really getting in trouble for that. We've had police even joke with us before that you can overstay and all you have to do is pay a small fee when you leave the country. Sometimes that's true, and a lot of people have done that and gotten away with it. But just so you know, people are getting checked at buses, and people are us included. We have been noticing that more than ever. I don't know if it's part of this crackdown, or we've been getting checked numerous times whenever we take a bus between cities. There will usually be someone at the bus station checking your FMM cards and just make sure you're still there legally and you're still within your time limit. And oftentimes they'll check your passport too on a bus. So if you're just taking a day trip from your hotel, historically you might have just left your passport at the hotel. I know we always did, but we have been getting that checked recently. Most of the time, 9 times out of 10, it would probably be fine if you just have a copy of your passport or just a regular ID. But there have been some instances where they insist on seeing your passport, your physical passport. So just bus travel in general, you can visibly see the crackdown on that. And one other different thing we've noticed with this new crackdown is that we have gotten asked a lot more questions about our trip. Now, we haven't had to show any proof of accommodation. When we came back in this most recent time, we did get asked very specific details about our trip. And also, we were not given 6 months. But we did not ask for 6 months. We didn't actually need it for this specific trip. But it is different in that every other time in the past when we came in and only needed a week or so, or a month, we've asked for that specific time, and they still just wrote down 180 days, 6 months, which doesn't come out to quite 6 months, but whatever. This time we were given specifically what we asked for, while also being asked a ton of questions. Definitely a new experience for us, where in the past we just always instantly were given 180 days default and never really asked any questions other than, are you here for tourism?
if you are flying or planning on coming into Mexico and you're hoping to get 6 months, everybody is having different experiences at different airports. And so I just want to say that if you fly in and you get the FMM, it is most definitely set in stone. There have been a few instances of people, flying into an airport in Mexico, getting an FMM, and they showed proof of accommodation, proof of a flight out, and they still got the less amount of time. So they immediately went to immigration and got it overturned and got longer. But it's a general rule of thumb that when you are handed an FMM with a specific amount of time on it, that is set in stone. You have to leave the country and come back in order to get a new one.
So yeah, I think the best way to stay up to date on this is to get on certain Facebook groups like Expats in Mexico or On the Road in Mexico. Then you're going to get up-to-date information and learn other people's stories at the immigration. So that's sort of what we've been doing. And to be honest, we're really not the best people to cover that topic because we currently have decided not to pursue temporary residency or permanent residency. Honestly, some other YouTubers have made some excellent videos on this. So I would just recommend getting on those Facebook groups and checking out some of those other YouTubers. People who are getting their residency or have gotten their residency or have really studied this thing. We probably covered that more than we even planned to. So basically, if you want to stay long-term in Mexico, you are supposed to get a temporary resident visa, which costs a lot more money and has a lot more requirements. Those requirements have been getting more intense lately. I don't even know if at this point we're even eligible as far as our income, and it's not even really something we are wanting to do at this exact moment to get residency. So we are looking at traveling to other countries through Latin America, but also doing other things in general. At one point, we definitely wanted to get temporary residency, but then we started thinking about our careers and different things, different factors, financial setbacks, and we really weren't ready to do that. Now, a lot of this is sort of learning through, trial through fire. It's been a learning experience. In the beginning, when we first came in, we had no idea that perpetual tourism was a thing and that it was frowned upon. We just kind of assumed, Mexico is giving people 180 days legal to work online during those 180 days as long as you're getting paid from a bank outside of Mexico and your company's outside of Mexico. So we were just kind of thinking, this is a digital nomad's dream and there's nothing wrong with that. But then we've learned recently that is very frowned upon, and that is why they're changing their laws to crack down on.
Yeah, so it took a while of living in Mexico to kind of join all of these groups and talk to a lot of people who also live in Mexico and got their residency to realize that the crackdown that's going on right now is to benefit Mexico themselves, because a lot of people come in, they're not contributing to the economy, and so Mexico is deciding to cut back on that, and we completely understand. I mean, like he said, I'm not even sure if we're eligible to get our residency card, but even if we were, right now we want to kind of pursue other paths instead of making sure that we solidify the next 4 years in Mexico.
Yeah, because I think if we had temporary residency, I know myself well enough to know that I probably wouldn't advance any further in my career, and I would just spend, years living in Mexico. It wouldn't be a good financial decision. I'd be maxing out credit cards.
But we'd get caught in that island time.
Yeah, so I think we are going to travel to other places. That was originally our plan anyway, to see more of the world. As is a very common story, we fell in love with Mexico. We repeatedly given 6 months in the past to stay in Mexico. So like many people, we just took advantage of that and didn't question, whether it was a good thing to do or not as far as Mexico's economy. And so they've changed the rules. I know a lot of people are upset about that, and it's understandable, and it is frustrating, especially if you're coming in as a tourist and you're not sure how much time you're going to be given. I think they will probably work out those kinks, and who knows, this crackdown may be reversed at some point. But the big thing is that I think that's part of it. When you leave your home country for extended periods of time, or when you permanently leave your home country, living that lifestyle is always going to come with setbacks and changes. But ultimately, I'm always going to be Team Mexico. I love this country. I'm always going to continue to come back in the future. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we will be eligible for temporary residency in the future, and that could be something we can look at. But as for now, we are going to travel to other countries. Mexico is still going to be a place that we come back to, probably just not 6 months at a time for the near future. Now we're going to jump into physical safety. A big one we get asked about is it safe to take taxi?
Personally, I'm going to go ahead and say yes, it is. Now, there are a couple things that you can do to make sure that you are taking a safe taxi, like you're not taking any type of scam taxi. And now, we have actually been scammed before on a taxi. It was one time in Oaxaca. We were on the coast in Mazunte, the Pueblo Mexico, and we were quoted at an amount, and when we got to the destination, he was adamant that it was, 100 pesos more?
Yeah, it was already an overpriced taxi, and then basically when we got out of the car, he just insisted that we agreed to pay him 100 pesos more than we agreed, which is like 5 USD more. So it wasn't a big deal, and I'm not one to get super confrontational. The biggest thing for me was that he instantly was aggressive, instantly agile, and just insisting, you're going to pay this or you're not getting out of my car type of thing. So
yeah, so we just paid it. And then there was also one time in Mexico City where the meter, I swear the meter was like, it was charging us way more per kilometer than it should have been. So when we got to our destination, we like owed a ton of money.
We were like watching it basically like, we're gonna have to get out of this car because we're not gonna have enough cash on us to pay this.
Yeah.
It keeps going up. So that was like a scam meter. So you have to watch out for certain taxi companies.
If you Facebook the name of the city you're in and then taxi, it'll come up with a ton of companies. You can look at their reviews, get their WhatsApp number, and then literally all you have to do is text them via WhatsApp. You can ask them how much it costs, continue the conversation, and bam, they'll come pick you up. So that's one way to know you're getting an actual legitimate taxi.
Probably some things you can look for too, like if the taxi's well marked. I'm not saying it's the right way to do it, but personally we have just been jumping in them at random. A lot of times you're just kind of where you need a taxi, so we just hop in one. Can be more cautious than that, but personally we've taken over 100 taxis, never had an issue. Maybe hundreds at this point. We have heard stories, of course, some people say they've had physical safety issues where they've been robbed or something like that in a taxi. So definitely not downplaying that or saying that didn't happen. Just personally so far, we haven't had any issues.
True, and I think if you are gonna be taking a taxi at night or in a weird part of the city where you don't feel comfortable, always trust that gut feeling and just call a taxi or go into a nearby hotel and get them to call you one, because that's better than just accepting a ride and feeling pressured into accepting a ride. So this next one is something that we actually do fairly often, and the question is it safe to take overnight buses? Yeah. So yes, we have taken a lot of overnight buses. From my experience, I do think that it's safe. So there are toll roads in Mexico called cuetas. I think I'm saying that right. Most of the time, these buses like Audio, OCC, Senda, these buses will usually be on those roads, except for when they get off to like detour through towns as actual stops on the route. And those are really actually safe roads, well paved. I mean, they are paved, they're toll roads.
They're like highways, basically.
Yeah, they're like basically our interstates.
I think not only are they safe, we've done more than a dozen probably and haven't had any issues. They're really the best way. Like the downside is you miss the beautiful scenery, but you save money on a hotel and you can just get those long bus trips done on an overnight, because oftentimes the buses take way longer than they say they're going to take. For the most part, I love the overnight buses, and the best case scenario is you just sleep through the whole thing. You do go through a number of checkpoints oftentimes when you're traveling by bus, like military checkpoints or police checkpoint, where they'll just randomly select a few passengers on the bus to check their luggage or check their tourist FMM card and their identification. And I think that's just so they can let everybody know on a bus that you might be checked at random. But that's never been a big deal, and we've never had any kind of safety concerns on the bus. The biggest worry would be the bus driver having less visibility on some of those mountain roads. And the same with driving at night. That's another big one. You hear a lot of people say never drive at night in Mexico, and that may be good advice. Personally, we don't have a whole lot of experience traveling at night. I think a lot of things get repeated when it comes to that. A lot of people will say you're going to hit livestock like cows in the road, and then a lot of people talk about the topes, which are like speed bumps. You'll only find those on like the public roads, not the cuetas, not the tolled highways. So yeah, that kind of stuff is true. And I think in general, driving at night, even where we're from in Western North Carolina, is just more dangerous. You have fog, you have less visibility, you have deer you can hit. That happens often. So driving at night anywhere is less safe. But I think as far as if you need to drive at night in Mexico and you're going to stick mostly to the highways, the tolled highways, you'd be fine. I've never seen livestock on a tolled highway or anything like that. And it really does, if you've never been or never been on one, it really does look like just a typical interstate in the USA. Probably good advice for people who have more experience than me that are saying don't drive at night. And if you are driving into Mexico, we get a lot of questions about border crossings. Personally, we haven't crossed in the Western USA since early 2018. For southeastern Texas, Eagle Pass is generally considered a pretty good one to cross at. It is, however, a little bit out of the way. More direct one that's also considered pretty decent most of the time is the Columbia Bridge crossing, which is more direct if you're coming down from San Antonio. That one often gets recommended. We've never personally crossed at that one. We have crossed at Nuevo Laredo though, and that one is generally considered a bad one to cross at because it is in the Tamaulipas state, which often has some things happening. Again, back to the Facebook groups, and I hate to constantly mention it, but on the road in Mexico is where you'll get the updated information about what's going on in each border town, and things do constantly change. So that's what you have to look for. So you can just go in there to a Facebook group, search whatever border crossing you're looking for, and there will be, hopefully there'll be up-to-date posts, ideally, about people who've crossed recently and their experience. So in general safety, we'll skim past this really quickly. You're gonna hear a lot of people say, isn't it dangerous to leave the resorts? That's often more times a statement than it is a question. A lot of people say don't leave the resorts in Mexico. That is the worst advice anyone can ever give you. You do have to be safe in Mexico. Bad stuff does happen here. But the big thing is, if you're not involved in certain things that go on, like between gangs and things like that, statistically, very, very rare that you will be a target. So it's well worth visiting. And personally, we don't even go to the damn resorts. In my opinion, that's not how to experience a country.
Well, we wouldn't even be able to make this video if we had followed that little statement or rule. So honestly, the number one thing we can say is that that is not true. You will see so much of the beauty of Mexico and everything Mexico has to offer if you stay away from the resorts. Yeah.
Also, I'm not going to, again, this is just our personal experience. Obviously, I've heard the stories of what can happen in Mexico and what has happened in Mexico. I'm not downplaying that at all. But I think it's relevant and only fair to mention that after the better part of a year traveling throughout Mexico, on more than half a dozen different trips, we have never had any problems at all in Mexico. We got scammed by a taxi driver once, things like that, but never any real issues. Meanwhile, my very first international trip, my brother and I went to France. We went all over Europe, but we went to Paris. On the second night we were there, we had our laptop grabbed off of our person in like a snatch and grab type of scam that's common there. So that was the second night. Now, her and I, in early 2020, we had a rental car in Portugal. First night, right?
Yeah,
first
it was the very first night. We had gotten checked into our Airbnb, parked the car in a parking lot, and somebody had busted the window out the next morning.
And I'm not calling these places dangerous by any means. I'm just highlighting that things can happen anywhere, and you have Mexico getting this bad reputation. I've personally been robbed in first night in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Amazing city, I love that city, but I was robbed there. So you do have these issues anywhere in the world. I don't think you should let that stop you from travel. I'd love to hear some similar stories from you guys. Latin America can be a very dangerous place to travel. Bad things can happen. You definitely have to remain smart and aware of your surroundings and make good decisions. But I think it's only fair to mention that we have traveled Mexico more than any other country outside of our home country. By far, it's not even close, and we've never had a single issue here. Knock on wood. That's actually not wood, but knock on wood.
We'll find wood to knock on, but
yeah. And again, none of this is to say that Mexico is safe. It's not. I think safety is relative. I don't think anywhere is technically safe or dangerous. It all depends on circumstances.
So this next question is about ATMs. Is it safe to use ATMs throughout the country in general? And I would say most of the time, yes. A couple tips that we can give you that would help you and make sure that you're not using a faulty ATM is to make sure you go to the bigger banks and the corporations. We use BBVA, that's a pretty good one. And also Scotiabank is another great one. Now, if you can actually go inside the bank, that's probably best, because if you have any issues with the ATM, the bank tellers will be there. Because you know, if you're just using a random ATM on the side of the street, it's not as secure and as safe as actually going in.
Yeah, because I mean, people know. It's like pretty much just wearing a sign like, I'm getting cash out over here.
And actually one time in San Luis Potosi, we were using an ATM. I can't remember what the brand was now, but I tried to get a lump sum of money off at the ATM. There was an extremely long line behind me and people were waiting to use the ATM. So whenever I went to get money off, it said that my transaction went through, but it didn't dispense the money. So in that situation, you just have to keep your calm and take a photo of the ATM, screenshot the location on Google Maps, and make sure that you call your bank immediately so that you can get that figured out. Luckily for us, we were able to get that figured out and we didn't lose any of our money. Now, another thing I want to throw in there while we're on the subject is that when you are in a foreign country, this applies to any country outside of your home country where you're going to be converting your home country currency to a different currency, make sure that you always decline the conversion, because if you accept that conversion, it basically costs you more and you're just losing money on that. So typically if you're converting your bills, at any ATM is going to ask you that. It's not necessarily a scam that is pertaining to only one area. It's like worldwide. It happened to us a lot in Europe as well. So just make sure, if you didn't already know that you're declining the conversions. Okay, so a lot of people ask about using your credit and debit cards. So personally, we use our credit and debit cards a lot here. So if a place accepts credit or debit, more than likely will use our card because cash is like, you need it a lot. So for like buses, street food, you need coins and preferably lower bills, because a lot of times it'll be hard to use a 200 or a 500 because it's harder to break those bigger bills. What we always do, we use credit cards or debit cards wherever they're accepted, and we just take a picture of the receipt and I download it to the cloud just to make sure that if anything happens to our credit card statement, we can go back and look. But nothing has been scammed off of us by using a credit or a debit card in Mexico. If you want to be prepared for it, I would definitely just keep your statements handy and even take photos of your receipts.
Yeah, a lot of times, especially when we first came, and I still think it's a good practice, we just got lazy with it. Every other day or every night, get on your bank statement and make sure you don't have anything pending that's not supposed to be pending. If you're traveling around, you're often booking a lot of things, and you need to keep a close eye on that. To follow that one, we also get asked a lot about fees, international transaction fees.
Yep, I was just about to talk about that too. Like, if you have a card that is globally accepted, like I know one of my banks has a global cash point type card where if you specifically use that card, they void all international transaction fees. But if your bank doesn't, then you'll see like all of these little charges after every single purchase, and it really does accumulate. Before you come, if you can set up a checking account that voids those fees, definitely will be better for you. And another thing too that our bank does is it reimburses our ATM transaction fees. If your bank is paying those back to you, you'll definitely enjoy those rebates because it's a lot.
So one question we get a lot is, do you have to speak Spanish fluently to visit Mexico or move to Mexico? The short answer is no, definitely not. I've seen a lot of people say, yes, you do. No, that's not true. We speak from experience because when we originally moved down into the Yucatan Peninsula, our Spanish was absolutely horrible.
Yeah, it was, we really had to work on it, but for starters, we know that you're able to navigate the country without speaking the language.
Yeah, Google Translate is going to be your best friend. I recommend actually downloading the language on the Google Translate app. That was a game changer for us. It always sort of got us out of any tough situation. We've never had an issue where someone got frustrated with us. Everyone was super patient with us. So we use a website called Skillshare. That's been awesome. People share like Spanish lessons and stuff like that. That's been excellent. We use YouTube and we use the popular app Duolingo to practice Spanish.
Yeah, and we also use an app called UTalk, and we'll leave some links in the description for you guys to check out the courses and the apps that we've been using if that's something you want to do and kind of further your Spanish learning.
Another thing we do if you're traveling in a group, we try to pick days where we only speak to each other in Spanish. So that really helps improve very quickly because it's easy to get lazy when you're traveling with somebody and just never speak in Spanish. Actually, we're living in the best time period of all time to travel to a country when you don't speak the language. We literally carry around with us a genius device that speaks every language in the world, so we're good.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't stress out about it. I would just like enjoy the process and enjoy the fact that when you arrive, your every day is going to be improvement on learning an additional language for you.
So one question we get a lot is obviously in relation to the pandemic. Now this is something we don't like to discuss a lot because the algorithm will actually block your videos, is what we've been told on YouTube if you talk too much about it. But I definitely recommend getting on Facebook groups for this too, because the situation does change. Like we've heard in the state of Jalisco, they are requiring vaccine cards now for visiting restaurants and for getting into hotels and things like that. So just like in the US, it varies big time by state. We've noticed that some states like Chiapas or the coast of Oaxaca, you wouldn't even guess there was any kind of pandemic going on. You know, nobody wears masks or anything like that. But the majority of Mexico, you're going to see a lot of mask wearing outside. A lot of times it's required. But for the most part, it's not going to restrict your travel movement. You just have to wear a mask quite a bit, especially inside of restaurant stores.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of places like Mexico's main gas station chain, OXXO, most of the time we've seen people get rejected at the door if they don't have a mask on. And then usually every business or establishment has a person or a device that will check your temperature and give you hand sanitizer when you walk in.
And that's been standard throughout the whole pandemic. At least when we arrived at the end of 2020, all of that was already set up. Sanitization stations and all that.
So this next question is about accommodation in general, what we used to book, prices and anything regarding that. So we're going to go ahead and jump into that and give you our experience. If you've seen any of our previous videos, you know that we have typically been using monthly stays at Airbnbs. Now that is notoriously right now getting more expensive with fees and just all these additional added extras that make it not really worth it.
Here lately we've been having a hard time finding any good deals. So we haven't been using Airbnb as much, and so it can be very tricky. So we've been using everything from Facebook Marketplace if we're staying somewhere longer, but mostly right now we've been using hostels and hotels, and that's been coming out cheaper than most Airbnb options. And the big disadvantage there is, like with an Airbnb, you typically have a full kitchenette, and it's more of like a house type setup where you have everything you need. And whereas a hotel, you might have a shared kitchen area or no kitchen area at all. So that can be really frustrating, but going forward, we are actually looking for more options as well. Best thing I can say is that when you arrive to a place, if you don't know what you're doing or where you're going to stay, maybe book a week at a hotel or Airbnb. And if you want to stay a lot longer, the cheapest way to find accommodation is really in the area. Look for a neighborhood you want to stay in. There'll be signs up with numbers to call, or you can ask around. And that honestly has been sort of the way I think a lot of Mexicans do it. And so that's how to get the cheaper way of accommodation if you're able to be a bit more flexible and not have anything lined up.
And I will say, just regarding Airbnb in general, like he said before, if you want to show up to a city and book like your first week or even your first month on Airbnb, you might be able to talk with the host about paying off of Airbnb so that, you know, it helps them out and it also helps you out because you're not paying any of their fees. That's actually something that's been offered to us a few times, and it's extremely worth it because obviously if you want to, you know, withdraw the money and pay the actual host, you'll get a better deal.
And the same goes for hotels too. If you're using Booking or something like that, when you get there, often you stay a few days, you can ask them. Many places, sometimes they can ask you, do you want to book off of Booking? And you can do like a monthly rate or something like that. So a lot of hotels, especially if you're in an area that's not as touristy, a lot of them will work out like a cool monthly deal with you or a weekly deal.
And adding to accommodation, we get a lot of questions about Wi-Fi because if you're anything like us, you're going to be working online or definitely needing good internet when you come to Mexico. So to answer that question is that we have always just made sure to reach out to the host or the hotel in general. Maybe you need to ask for a room that's closer to the Wi-Fi modem.
I like to say that every challenge visiting Mexico is worth it because the country is amazing, it's beautiful. There is challenges, and Wi-Fi is definitely one of those challenges. It's just, as a general rule of thumb, sort of hit or miss. So for those of you who don't know this, when you're connected to any Wi-Fi, you can use your computer or phone to go check out free online speed tests. Literally look up speedtest.com or just Google speed test. You can run a speed test and it'll tell you how fast that Wi-Fi is. So that's another thing you could always request from your host, and sometimes they have that listed, like Airbnb host or a hotel. Worst comes to worst, if you do book somewhere that the Wi-Fi is crap, you're gonna have to find like a
cafe,
restaurant
or cafe where you can sit for long periods of time. You can do like co-working spaces or even a beach club that you pay for the entire day, and you can eat there, chill there, work there, and use their Wi-Fi. So there are workarounds if you just somehow happen to get unlucky and your Wi-Fi is cutting in and out or you're really far away from it.
And as far as healthcare, we get a lot of questions about healthcare. We personally only have United States healthcare. We've never made the jump to get healthcare in Mexico. A lot of people do. Personally, think it's easier to go with a company that also has offices in the US. That way, if you're back and forth quite a bit, it just makes it easier. But if you know of any good companies based in Mexico where you can get different various forms of insurance, feel free to comment them. That's something we're still learning. But as a general rule of thumb, you're going to find that most cities in Mexico have pretty decent hospitals. We frequent the pharmacies personally for what we need, and the pharmacies are absolutely everywhere. We've never been in any like dire situation. We've just kept U.S. insurance. And you can check with your U.S. insurance company to make sure you're covered for international incidences. So a lot of people have questions about sort of some of the day-to-day life stuff they might be concerned about. I think most things in Mexico are actually easier once you get used to Mexico. Like for instance, getting my hair cut is easier here. Like not only more affordable, usually I'm always staying within an easy walk to a barbershop. So it's not like before where you might have to make an appointment and, you know, drive 20 minutes to a certain barber and pay $20, $30 for a haircut. And the barbers here actually take their time with it. They do a great job.
Just the transition from living in the United States, you know that you literally have to drive everywhere. Like you have to drive to the grocery store, you have to drive to restaurants. But in Mexico, we've always been in walking distance. And so the same thing goes for food. Like once you get used to it, you just walk outside of your door, find the closest market, pay a couple bucks for some fruit.
Yeah, and now when we visit back to the US, we're noticing how inconvenient everything is there. You know, we're fighting through traffic, having to go to Whole Foods or wherever to get the same type of groceries for way more expensive than we get them in Mexico. Most of the time where we stay has like a bus route that goes right past it or very close by. So it's always super simple in Mexico if you don't have a car to just go hop on a bus Same with like getting food fast. If you're in the right areas in Mexico and there's lots of street food, it's so simple here to just walk up to a street food vendor now and just grab a hamburger, a hot dog, or some tacos, something like that, versus waiting in a long line to grab breakfast on a Monday morning, you know, in the United States in a fast food restaurant. Same with doing laundry. You know, the lavanderias are incredible. You just drop your clothes off. They're everywhere. They're dotted everywhere. You know, they tell you when you're going to pick them up. You come back later, pick them up. It's that simple. All of your laundry is washed and dried for you.
A lot of people want to know how we make money online. And now this has been changing. Now, when we first came to Mexico, I had a corporate job that was based out of the US, and because of the pandemic, everything went virtual, and they also allowed me to work outside of the United States. That was a massive part of our stability, and just knowing that we would have that income coming in every 2 weeks was like a very big plus to being in another country.
Things have really changed quite a bit as we've gone. Most of my work background was in like, you know, working with my hands, warehouses, production, things like that. So it was a huge career change for me to sort of get into marketing and freelancing and things like that. It was a very, very big challenge. First, I made the mistake of thinking I had to spend a lot of money to make money. Before we even came to Mexico, I had blown too much money and done things the wrong way. When the pandemic first started, I went from doing a bunch of freelance and all things like that to doing a bunch of side hustles. I got on Amazon and started taking advantage of their ridiculous overtime they were giving out during the early days of the pandemic. I did like a training and onboarding job for a lunch delivery company and was doing all these things to try to get back some of that money I lost from doing this big career change. It was a disaster. It was not easy, but it ironed itself out, and I learned some of the kinks. I'm still learning. But luckily, during that whole period, like she said, she had that job where it was very stable. She had the stable job. I had the opposite of stable job. I did a lot of freelancing, and that was something that helped me in the beginning too. That freelancing had paid off, because when I came down to Mexico, I had several companies that I was still freelancing with. I was doing website design for them, but it was still not stable. It was back and forth. So to sort of fill that gap, I use websites like Fiverr. That's a website where you can list skills. It also tends to not be very consistent, but you can make some money that way. Things like website design, social media management, you can list that on there. Copywriting, so various types of marketing, social media marketing. So that's what I was doing during the early days in Mexico. So that's when we were posting very regularly and things were going very, very smoothly. Probably noticed that we stopped posting as regularly after a little while in Mexico. That's because things got very turbulent again. Several of the original clients moved on and done different things. So I was having to really push for things like Fiverr, different freelance positions. It was taking me 3 times as long as it used to make the same amount of money. And on top of that, you got your...
And on top of that, I also got a promotion with the company I was working for. So I went higher. I started with like customer service, but then I went into corporate, and that was still online work. We just had all of this on top of one another. Like, we had me getting a big promotion, which required me to work more hours and work harder, and then we had him who was on all of these different freelance sites, lost a lot of clients, and we just had to kind of ride that wave. If you're watching our video trying to plan and prepare to move out of your home country, you're gonna want to start now with these freelance sites like Fiverr, Upwork, teaching online. I know a lot of people are like skeptical about teaching online, but there are a lot of websites that require you to have a degree, and there are some that don't require you to have a degree. So we can list all these websites in the description below so that you can go ahead and get started building a rapport and getting like 5-star clients with all of these websites. That way it's not so choppy when you actually move, and you can count on an income.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have a stable position that you can count on, it makes it much easier. So if you're able to apply for customer service positions and just things like that before coming in, and you're able to secure one, that'll be the best way and the best experience for when you work remotely outside of your home country.
Definitely the best case scenario is you have some type of job where you're getting a steady paycheck. But if it's inconsistent money, it can be stressful. But the biggest thing is not to panic, and having a savings can help you not panic. Career change is possible. I'm proof of that. I've worked years at warehouses, production warehouses, did everything from heavy machine operating to warehouse management. So I climbed up that ladder to some degree, and it is possible. It's just, it gets expensive, and you have side hustles and things like that can sort of bridge that gap. Long story short, her job sort of went from more demanding to even more demanding to things were changing, the equipment was changing.
Yeah, like our video that we made when we visited home, that was actually part of that, was seeing family, and also me having to change from a small iPad for my work job to a massive computer setup, 2 monitors, a mouse, a keyboard, a headset. It went from being super flexible to you can only work remotely in one spot because it's going to be hard to haul these massive computers around. Long story short, in order to pursue the lifestyle we're currently living now, I had to quit my job.
Yeah.
So
that stable income is gone, but so is that tie down where we weren't able to create very often. So now we're both doing more freelance and things like that, so we're really having to buckle down. But it also gives us more flexibility and contributes to the reason why we decided not to get our temporary residency in Mexico, because it makes us more flexible and we can travel to different places and see more places. Now going forward, I don't know how long that'll last. From the beginning, we didn't know how long our remote work would last, and living in other countries and things like that, because your financial situation changes. Ours has certainly been up and down. Before the pandemic started, we had looked into seasonal work, and that was something that we actually started on doing. That got canceled due to the pandemic, and I had to go to Amazon and make all that money back in order to be able to move to Mexico during the pandemic. Seasonal work might be something we look into in the future if our finances are not where we need them to be. For the time being, we're really excited about it because we have more flexibility. We're going to be able to do some more traveling and things like that. But things change, and we'll see how it goes. As always, we're hoping for the best, and we're going to keep exploring and bringing you guys content. We're going to keep coming to Mexico on the regular and figuring it out as we go.
Yep, and now I know that this has been really lengthy. There are so many things that you just wouldn't even think that you can offer online. So you need to think about what exactly you are extremely good at, or what service that you can offer to other people that would be beneficial.
Or what could you be good at if you spend some time practicing, because I wasn't good at much of anything online 2 years ago, and now I can make money online. So.
Yeah, and so what you have to kind of hone down on that niche and think about what it is. Like, a lot of people say we're social media managers, we're copywriters, but what does that really mean? If you don't know what that is, how can you start? We need to make a video going into more depth.
Definitely don't let it get you down, because we are living in the best time to do something like that, to work online. We're going to do a whole video about it, and not to throw myself under the bus here, but the video will be very beneficial because she has a degree, so she can show you some of the options if you have a college degree. But I don't have a degree, so I can show you some of the ways to make money if you're like me and you don't have a college degree.
So, if you're looking for that type of content, expect it from us in the future. This video is, more so for frequently asked questions and not a, honing in on job positions.
Yeah, when you're trying to change career paths, don't fall for any scams. A lot of people try to sell you a dream. So there's a lot of scam sites out there that basically try to get you to, remote work or multi-level marketing, all that crap. We'll cover all that later. Again, this video is sort of broad range. We just wanted to answer some questions without getting too in depth, hopefully. We struggle with what exactly to call this, frequently asked questions, or sort of a guide of moving or visiting. Now, we get a lot of questions that we're really not the best to answer. Like, we get a lot of questions about how to get a driver's license in Mexico. We get questions related to bringing your family to Mexico, like school systems or best places to move with kids.
Yeah, trust me, we could research it and try to give you our best opinions on it, but I think we can both agree, and you probably would too, that it's better to hear it from somebody who has personally experienced it, and that's where other YouTubers and Facebook groups will come in handy for you.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to give you a great subjective answer or the best answer. We get a lot of those questions because, we marketed ourselves having been expats in Mexico, because we were considering ourselves expats since we were spending indefinite periods of time, the better part of a year living in Mexico. But we weren't actually physically moving there as far as getting driver's license, becoming residents. So for those questions, you'll have to find, more qualified people to talk about. That's something you definitely don't want bad information on.
And that's something we don't want to give bad information on.
Yeah. Another thing with the visa changes that have been on everybody's mind so much, I think ultimately at the end of the day, Mexico is going to make rule changes, and, they have to do what they have to do. And for me, I'm just really chalking it up to it's part of the challenges and hassles of moving from your home country and living this lifestyle. Things always change. For those of us that didn't get residency or not eligible to get residency, we're experiencing that firsthand, but it's part of it, and I'm definitely not turning on Mexico or leaving Mexico for that reason. We're not going to continue to be perpetual tourists all the time, but we're also not going to get that residency, so we are going to check out other countries, and we have a lot of things that we want to do as far as our professional career and things like that. So, we meet a lot of people in Mexico, bars and things like that, and they've had this very interesting life. They've accomplished so many great things, made amazing connections and friendships. People tell you that when you're traveling long term, you're going to make all these amazing connections and friendships, and sometimes that's true, but a lot of times that comes from your professional work or career. So yeah, we want our own stories at the end of the day, so we can't just completely dismiss our careers and get residency in Mexico and then just spend the next untold amount of years washed away on some beach. We'll be the people with stories to tell in Mexico someday of our lives.
Well, guys, thank you for sticking around. These are the most frequently asked questions that we get, and we hope that, we've covered a lot, or maybe some that you have been interested in hearing about. I hope this video was helpful to you, and if it was, make sure that you give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel, because it really helps us out.
These questions sort of benefit a traveler to Mexico or a resident, because a lot of times the travelers become residents or people who stay a lot longer than they plan to. i.e. us. A lot of these will apply to both ends of the spectrum. Again, it was sort of a broad topic, so hopefully we didn't squeeze too much in one video.
Yep, until next time guys, hasta luego.
Hasta luego.